Welcome to Issues, a program that explores topics affecting Wilmington and you, the people who live and work in this wonderful city. I'm your host, John Rago, and on today's program, the issue is a new entrepreneurial spirit in Wilmington. What is it? Will it take hold? And what does it mean for the local business community and our efforts to promote economic development? Well, here to provide information and insight about this subject are Jeff Flynn, the Economic Development Director for the City of Wilmington, Mac Nagaswami, who is the CEO and founder of Carvertise, LLC, and Jon Brilliant, Chairman of the Board of Start It Up Delaware. I want to thank you all for being with us today. And look, Silicon Valley, for our viewers at home, Silicon Valley is a term we've come to know since the 80s, I would imagine. Area near San Francisco, a big hub for high tech, and all these what seems to many of us, all these brilliant people gathered together and doing brilliant things. And sorry about the use of your name there. And by the way, that's what they call me at many times, Jon Brilliant, but today I'll be John Rago. But anyway, so Silicon Valley, and now I think what's exciting is that the possibility of creating some sort of a hub here in Delaware. I mean, we've got support from the governor and the economic development director for the state, and the city's here with us. But John, let me turn to you as the board chair of Start It Up Delaware, and let's talk a little bit about what is Start It Up Delaware. What do you hope to do? How far along are we? What is Start It Up Delaware?
So Start It Up Delaware began with a simple idea, right? To break down the barriers to being an entrepreneur. We want to be a catalyst for dreamers. We don't believe we're going to be Austin or Boston or Silicon Valley. We're going to be Wilmington, Delaware. And we're going to fit within our community what we need to do to facilitate folks like Mac building a business here in Delaware. So we do things such as co-working space where you can come and rub elbows with other like-minded entrepreneurs and hopefully serendipitous collisions occur. We have community programming where we host startup weekends. We have classes on how to build a mobile app if you're not technical, how to protect your IP. So we want to break down the barriers to being an entrepreneur. We want to be all-inclusive to the entire community, so we're trying to break down those barriers. And we also want to embrace failure, right? With taking risk, failure will occur. And so historically, we haven't always sort of embraced failure. And so that's another cultural shift that we're trying to make. We started Start Up Delaware about 18 months ago. And Matt can talk about the space because he operates out of the Loft, which is our physical space.
That's we've got this 605 Market Street,
North Market.
Here in downtown Wilmington.
Correct,
okay.
Correct. And we've got this ever-growing members of that community who come in and participate in the community as they build their company. And so ours is meant to give you access to the resources, again, break down those barriers to being an entrepreneur.
Well, you may have answered another question I had, which was the second question, which is why do folks have to come together in some creative space? Why can't they, for instance, some of the new high-tech stuff came out of dorm rooms or garages. Right. So I think you may have answered it.
So we have a physical space, but it's not about the physical space, right? It's about building a community. So in fact, if you are working at it out of your garage, you don't physically have to come to the Loft, but come and be a member of our community, which will give you the access to potentially a customer, potentially a resource that you need, potentially do a collaboration with somebody in that space. So it's not about the physical space, it's about building a community. 1313 Innovation, what Paul McConnell's doing in the old Hercules building, is itself building part of that community. So this isn't about physical space, it's about building a community. Innovation occurs between the ears, not in four walls. Yeah. So we like to think about innovation more broadly than just a physical space.
Why Delaware? For instance, if we have hubs, I was looking through California's the leading area for high-tech innovation and development. New York, Washington, Texas, and Massachusetts, Pittsburgh. I mean, I can go through a list here of some of the ones that are mentioned on frequently visited websites in terms of where a lot of this stuff is happening. That's where, now I'm not suggesting for a moment we not bring that kind of excitement to Wilmington, but how do we determine that it would work here?
Well, I think you got to start somewhere,
okay.
Right? And so we're starting with the basic building blocks, yet we have historical successes that people don't celebrate. We all know of the big companies that are here, but we could talk about, Gore and its humble roots and how it began here. We could talk about Vance Kirschner's Labware, one of the largest lab information management systems in the world that began in a dorm room, or his apartment rather, at the University of Delaware. So what you don't see, and what we're also trying to build, is visibility into all the things that are actually happening here. There's many more things that are happening here than people are aware of.
Yeah.
And so that's all part of it too. And for us, it's not necessarily starting with drawing everybody to Delaware. That's going to take time. But it's drawing out of the community those people who want to be entrepreneurs and giving them the opportunity to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, Mac, you're local. So, I mean, you're raised here, went to school locally,
Yeah.
and then you had this like idea. It was fascinates me.
Yeah.
In a minute, we're not going to look at the video right now. We'll look at the video for Carvertise.
Okay.
But just tell me a little bit about having the idea and what it means for you right now to be part of, because I think you're listed as a member of Started Up Delaware.
Yeah.
So tell me a
So
little
what
bit
it
about
means
that.
to be a member at Started Up
Yeah,
Delaware.
but I mean, having this idea, I mean, you just had this idea at school, right?
Sure. Yeah. So, it's just a question of whether you want to pursue the idea that you get, right? And I think that really differentiates between a dreamer and an entrepreneur, somebody who has a brilliant idea and then kind of sits on it and writes it in their notepad and looks back at it 20 years later saying, that would have been really cool. I remember when I thought about that. Or somebody who thinks about that and then takes action upon that idea to make it a reality. So I chose the latter. And I haven't looked back since these past 2.5 years.
Could you have done it without being part of Started Up Delaware?
No, absolutely not. So I wanted to make a comment on that, on one of the things that we visited earlier, which is, why create an ecosystem, a community where entrepreneurs can get together instead of building it out of your dorm room or building it out of your apartment? Well, taking a very macro level look at that question, I think we can see that communication accelerates progress on absolutely every frontier that we've ever seen in human civilization. It's like when there's access to trade, when there's access to communication networks, whether it be railroads or telephone lines or airways, that's when we see progress really boom. So why create an ecosystem like this is so we can rub elbows with the right people in order to accelerate progress. I can't tell you how many things I've learned. I have no IT background, no tech background, and if I was working on Carvertise in my dorm room or all by myself in an apartment, there's no way I would be able to learn the things that I've learned by going to a co-working space, by being a member of Started Up Delaware, and kind of gaining tidbits of information, which are all relevant for me growing Carvertise. But you need that interdisciplinary you need that kind of overlapping of many different fields of knowledge, and that only happens when a bunch of people get together from different spaces.
Yeah, I'm building up the excitement, by the way, for Carvertise. We'll either look at it in this segment or we'll look at it in the next segment. But I want folks to know that Matt created a product, if you will, and it's a way for you to possibly make some money at home, or not at home. You have to be driving your car, but we'll come back to that in a minute.
Sure.
So Jeff Flynn, as the Economic Development Director for the City of Wilmington, I'm used to, and Jeff and I have worked together over the years on incentive packages for businesses. If we were here, Jeff, 10 years ago, and we were talking about the economic development, the future of Wilmington, we'd be talking about DuPont, Christiana Care, we'd be talking about Bank of America, and we'd be putting these incentive packages together and all this good stuff. How does this all work, this new, I call it a new model, it's not a new model, but I mean new for us here. How does it all work? I mean, how does it fit into the economic development plan? How do we move our city forward?
Sure, and that's right, John. Our more traditional incentive programs work very effectively with larger companies. We attract them into Wilmington. They generate wage taxes. We take a portion of that wage taxes. We allow that company to use that to get relocated here in Wilmington. With the entrepreneurial community, these are ideas and concepts that are launching. It's pre-wage tax, it's pre-jobs. So it's a little bit tougher to come up with a more traditional incentive package. So I think what we want to do in Wilmington is create an environment where this ecosystem that you heard John and Mac talk about can flourish. And that includes more creative funding sources, that there are people like John and others throughout the state trying to form these these funds, but it also includes encouraging successful entrepreneurs that started here in Wilmington to reinvest back into that community through mentorship and funding. And if you sort of read the popular literature on entrepreneurism, this development of the ecosystem, the mentoring, and the reinvestment back into the community, it seems to me that is one of the recurring themes.
Right. And it does require us to think differently. It's not necessarily immediate results in terms of jobs or additions to the tax base or whatever, but it could be in the future. I know there's also, I saw something on a website that said, as far as being an entrepreneur, that you know, be prepared to fail also. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, Mac,
yeah, a very popular kind of maxim in the world of entrepreneurship is fail fast, succeed faster. So you want to fail fast and cheap in order to find the right recipe to succeed that much quicker. And then to accompany it, you see a typical meme, which is, start, success. But what it really is like start, failure, 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 success. So, a big part about creating this ecosystem of entrepreneurship is to create a climate where risk and failure is accepted. That's part of the game. You have to acknowledge that, and you keep on going down that cycle. Eventually, you're going to find the right recipe and put the pieces of the puzzle together.
For those, especially young people watching this program throughout the city of Wilmington, some people do not perform well in their traditional school setting, but yet they have these ideas. And am I right to think that this is what you're encouraging? I'm not suggesting you're encouraging not to be in school, but another place where you can have your ideas come to life?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people talk about the chicken and egg, and the chicken and egg of starting companies are, do we need capital or do we need companies, right? And I'm a big believer that there's billions and billions of dollars sitting in the capital markets waiting for a great idea. It has to start with great ideas. We at Startup Delaware talk about building the top of the funnel, which is this big, wide swath of ideas that get narrowed down to those ideas that can see the light of day. Capital will always find great ideas, right? Capital looking for a great idea just sits in the bank account waiting for that great idea to happen. So as Jeff pointed out, we're trying to build an ecosystem of mentors, right? So Mac and I met each other when he was at the University of Delaware, and we were going through a tent, and there were 10 or 15 companies that had ideas, and we were each given tickets. We get to vote with our tickets as to which idea we liked, and you can't help but be energized when talking to Mac, and he's very enthusiastic and very inspirational as a startup guy. But it's that mentorship, right? Having somebody who's been there, done it before, perhaps can help you avoid complete failure, maybe partial failure. Failure will always occur. Failure is a necessary part of the ecosystem. But by giving you access to mentors and building this network, that's what you need. If you're a young person in the community, your first question is, where do I go? Well, you're immediately going to go to your immediate network, maybe mom or dad, or a brother, sister, or cousin. But if they weren't mentors, if they were professionals, they worked in some other big company,
or couldn't take the time with you for whatever reason.
This is the environment we're trying to build. We'll match you up with people.
All right, we'll take a short break and then we'll come back in just a moment. I like the idea. As a young guy in school, I was always afraid to fail, and I think I was taught that you don't fail. So I kind of never really wanted to take a chance. And I'm hoping that young people who hear this program will think a little bit differently about what we're calling this new spirit of entrepreneurship, if you will, in terms of what some of the possibilities are for you out there at home and some of your brilliant ideas. But we'll be right back. Issues will continue in just a moment.
Okay, Simon, what do people wear?
Clothes.
That's right, so it's important to learn how to dress yourself. Here's how it's done. Shirt, underwear, pants, socks, shoes. Underwear, always first, name tag on the back. Then pants and shirt. Go ahead and put this on. Now with the shirt, you want to make sure the first button's right or you have to start all over again, okay? Socks left on left, right on right. Tying the shoes, we're gonna take the laces, we're gonna cross them over, we're gonna turn around where the bunny goes down in the hole, pull it tight, and bunny ears. Got it?
Most parenting is hard to do in just 2 minutes. But 2 minutes twice a day making sure they brush is easier, and it could help save them from a lifetime of tooth pain.
We are your Wilmington City Council, and we're also your neighbors.
We're asking you to let us know about your community events, achievements, concerns, and issues.
That's why we created a special email address that will connect you to all of us in City Council.
Drop us an email about things going on in your neighborhood with Community Events 22 at wilmingtonde.gov. That's Community Events 22 at wilmingtonde.gov.
And we're back on Issues. Thanks so much for being with us today. And we're talking about a new era of entrepreneurism, I guess is, I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but I think I am. But these ideas that come to our head, and what can we do with these ideas, and who's out there to help us fund these ideas to make them something bigger? Gosh, I think it's a fascinating subject. And in the first part of the program, we talked to Mac, and Mac has a company called Carvertise, and we talked about it a little bit. But why don't we look? What do you want to do? You want to tell me about it first, or look at the video first?
Whichever one you
Okay.
prefer.
Why don't we do this? Let's look at the video.
Okay, so look, you drive every day. School, work, visiting family, shopping, you name it. For all of us, driving's just a normal part of our lives. But what if you can make money from driving where you go already? That's where Carvertise comes in. Carvertise pays you every single month for driving with a small advertisement on your car. The idea is simple. Carvertise searches for active car drivers that get exposure where brands want their message seen. They then wrap the cars in a small ad, and the driver goes back to driving around like normal. At the end of every month, we send a check to the drivers. Pretty simple. So, you're a driver. How do you join? 3 easy steps. Go to carvertise.com, fill out a small questionnaire about where you drive, hit submit, that's it. Carvertise will then begin searching for a brand that wants to advertise on your car.
We'll close it out. And sign, drive, and cash arrive.
Sign, drive, cash arrive.
I love it. I love it. Okay. Are you ready for the extra business you're going to get out of this?
Well, let's see.
Let me just
Sure,
close
sure.
that. All right. So you had this idea, and look, there are folks watching right now. Sure, I want to make some money. You can put something on my car if you
Sure.
want. How's it work?
So how's it work? So from the driver's perspective, what we do is we connect you with brands in the community who want to get exposure where you naturally drive already.
Okay.
So when you think about it, if you're just a normal driver going from point A to point B, and maybe you got point C and D along the way, picking up your kids from school and going to the grocery store, you're driving out and about in the community pretty frequently. And to most people, who take these kind of trips, there's a value associated with that trip that you take if there was an advertisement on your car, because you're getting exposure in front of thousands of eyeballs, which otherwise that real estate space on your car is just going unused. You're just creating it, using it as a car, which to date is the only way we've known. So from the car driver's perspective, signing up with Carvertise, right? We screen your driving. We look to see where you start, where you end, what paths you travel, what times. Then we match you with brands who want exposure in the community and who want exposure where you naturally drive already. How it worked from the car driver's end is when we get this information, we screen it, we filter it, and then we give you a call and say, hey, we have X advertiser who's interested in putting an advertisement on your car. Here are the terms of the deal. It might be a 3-month contract, it might be a 6-month contract, and then we pay the car drivers $100 a month. We put an ad on their car, they drive about like they normally do, except now they're getting paid to advertise for a brand that they like.
Now, are you prepared? I'm not sure. It's you and how many people in the company?
Me and my partner, Greg,
Greg.
are full-time right now.
Okay, full time. Then you have some others, I think, to help
we
on
have
the.
two developers.
Are you prepared for this thing to go big, or
That's what we're aiming for. So if
Okay.
it happened tomorrow, we wouldn't be. but if we put the right infrastructure in place, then we will be.
Is this the capital following the idea, or what gets you ready for this thing to become huge? And remember this, folks, you met him here on this program. But what?
So it takes two people to dance, right? So I think, just like Jon Brilliant said, capital follows good ideas, but likewise, good ideas needs the capital to grow. So right now, the ball's really in our court, in Carvertise's court, in appropriately presenting Carvertise to the investor community, making our case for why we're a good seed investment. And a lot of that comes down to the traction that we've gained in this market already, and the game plan moving forward.
Is it John? Is it easy, or Jeff? What do we do here to help? Again, I'm not passing judgment on the company, because the company has to stand on its own.
Yeah.
It's got the numbers have to work for people, and so on and so forth. But let's assume for a moment all the numbers work, and it's like this is like this huge thing just waiting. So what do we do to help? I mean, how does
so first and foremost, and Mac and I have talked a fair amount about this. The key at the beginning of a company, human capital is certainly an important element of starting a company, but at the end of the day, you need critically one thing, and that's a customer, right? And so Mac's at this stage of proving that there are customers who want, so he's got advertisers who are actually putting advertisements on cars. So he's proving there's an economic model. Someone will pay him something that he can then, in fact, pay those drivers. He can wrap that car, and he can actually make some money at it. Once you get to that phase, then it becomes, let's introduce him to the right sources of capital. In fact, Mac and I have had these conversations about introducing him to capital, right? Because now we're saying, look, you've got a customer, you've got a proven business model. Now we're at that proof of concept. Beyond proof of concept, we're now at that point of scaling, and Mac and I sort of debate, is he ready to scale big, or is there an interim phase before you scale? And that's a decision for each business that's unique to that business. But Mac has a system where there's some other pieces of the scalability that needs to be worked out. So there's some, what we call interim seed capital, that will get him to create that scalable platform. So he's proven there's a business. Right now it's about, how do I prove that there's a scalable platform, and then find some more capital on top of that to scale the business at that point.
All right, now, if I'm a government guy and I'm used to this model we talked about before, put an incentive package together to bring the jobs and the people here, how does government now react to what's going on here with Mac and with other young entrepreneurs? What do we do? Do we actually go out and find the capital for them, or what should our role be, I guess? I'm not asking you for particulars. I'm asking what our role, or what government's role ought to be.
Sure, John. First, let me step back and sort of emphasize what John said about the customer. And in our office here in the City of Wilmington, we get a lot of Wilmingtonians that come in to us, and they have a business idea. And the first thing they generally say is, but I don't have any money. And I need a place for my business. And I need this equipment for my business. And what we try to confer to them is, you need a customer. And so I want to emphasize that it is important for people not to let the lack of money get in the way of the idea.
Oh, good. Okay.
Now, later on, after you develop your plan and you develop a customer base, will you need funding? Absolutely. And that's what the later stages that John mentioned. But what we can do in our office is, if somebody comes in with an idea and doesn't have a business plan, we can link them up with specialists at the Small Business Development Center at the University of Delaware and help to generate a plan. We'll work with them individually to help them determine what their customer base might be here in Wilmington or more regionally. And we have a small business development specialist, Danita Thomas, who will work with people. And we even have business plan development classes.
You also mentioned, and we were talking during the break, that there are other organizations out there that sort of can help nurture or help somebody get organized in their ideas, like Junior Achievement, did you mention?
That's right. For all the young people watching, Junior Achievement is a great resource. Go to your teacher or your mentor and find a way to get into the local Junior Achievement program.
John, you mentioned.
Yeah, the other program that's going to be increasing with some additional funding from some local entrepreneurs this year is what's called the Diamond Challenge. So it's run by the Horn Program for Entrepreneurship at the University of Delaware. Dan Freeman runs that program, funded by Charlie Horn, a University of Delaware alumni. And it's meant to get out to the high schools and a competition for business. And so we try and both get high school students to come up with ideas, put together a team to come up with an idea. We give each of the high schools hopefully a mentor for each of those teams, somebody in the community, and then there's a competition at the end where they present their idea in front of people, in fact, to be rewarded cash. So I think there's, it's a way to, you're in school, you don't have to quit school to do it, and you can get access to great people and great ideas. In terms of, one of the things you mentioned, and I'm not an expert on this, and politics is not my strong suit. In fact, I don't like to participate in politics. But when I look at, and you mentioned the word, what can government do to incentivize? I think it comes down to investing in MAC, in a MAC in Delaware, comes down to tax incentives. So there are other jurisdictions, I can't quote them, but I know that provide tax incentives to invest in early stage companies. Maybe it's a reduction in capital gains over time, but there are ways in which we can encourage that I've seen successful in other jurisdictions that maybe
Good.
something to
Okay.
consider.
Well, and we only have a minute left in the program, believe it or not. But that's good. I'm glad you said that. It's something we can, government ought to look at. And look, for again, folks sitting there, and we've talked about things like the Start It Up, and it's at 605 Market
North
Street.
Market, yep.
But can they just stop by?
Absolutely.
Okay. So who do they call, or how do they get there?
So you can go to startupde.com, or you can just come to 605 North Market Street. And in fact, Mac will attest to when you walk in there, members of the community will greet you. If Mona Parikh, who's our managing director, isn't sitting there, you can walk in, and it's a very friendly community, and people will help you find your way in.
All right. Well, listen, it's been a short time here together, but I thank you all very much. Great. Best of luck to you, Mac, on the Carvertise. And John, thank you so much for what you're doing for Mac and others. And Jeff, we'll have some work to do here in government and as we look to the future with all this. Okay, that's all the time that we have for today's program. We hope you've enjoyed the topic. And if you have any thoughts on this discussion, please tweet them at WITN22 WILM. Hashtag Issues22, or post your comments on this video's YouTube page. So for WITN22 and the Wilmington City Council, I'm John Rago, and thanks so much for being with us.